Let me tell you a story. It's not a very remarkable story. It's a story that you may or may not find interesting. Back when I was in middle school, 8th grade, um, I got this idea to create paper crossbows using tubes of paper. I would take a tube of paper, roll it up. Using a marker, I would stuff the tube of paper. First, I would wrap duct tape around the tube, and then I would stuff the tube with scraps of paper, trash, plastic, various other things, and then I would cover the tube. And out would come this rather sturdy paper tube, and I would take two of them, I would arrange them like this, and then put a rubber band with two binder clips, and I would stretch it back, and there's a binder clip at the back, and I made a bunch of arrows made out of duct tape and paper. The arrowhead was made out of Gorilla Tape. The shaft was a single piece of paper that had been rolled up into a pencil thin stick, and I put feathers on the end of the arrow, and I had a crossbow. I did this all during the class of a rather lenient teacher. Um, she was a social studies teacher in 8th grade. She was very lenient. I developed this crossbow over the course of one of the classes in her class. She seriously did not care. She thought it was pretty cool, actually, and so I sold the crossbows for $5 a piece at $1 an arrow. I only worked on it for like a week before I got bored, but during that time, all around campus, you could see arrows going across. It was pretty funny. Everyone wanted one. One time we were playing catch with the arrows. I would fire the arrows and people would catch them. And one of the arrows landed in the bag. A teacher was hauling a giant Christmas wreath, or I don't know, some sort of object that an arrow could get embedded in, some sort of mesh object. I think it might have been a wreath, like a Christmas wreath. And I shot the arrow, and the arrow went whew, in the Christmas wreath, yeah? And the teacher was like, "What is going on here?" I ran up to the teacher. I was short at this time. I must have been like 5'5", 8th grade. And I pulled the arrow out and ran back, and the entire cafeteria, we were doing this in the cafeteria, was like, "Ah!" The entire cafeteria applauded. I don't know what kind of lesson you can learn from that story. I could have charged more for the crossbows. I could have kept producing them and making money. But truth be told, I got bored. I get bored of my exploits very easily. The teachers never had to step in and stop anything because after a week I got bored, stopped making them, stopped selling them, and they disappeared. After about a week, they were gone. No more crossbows because I wasn't making them anymore. I stopped selling them because I got bored. I get bored very easily. I'm reasonably certain that I have undiagnosed ADHD. If you've listened to some of my rambles in the past, you probably watched me flail around like this. It's just I've always been sort of on edge. No, more like energetic. I've always been a very energetic person. When I was a kid, I would always do energetic stuff. One of my pastimes as one of my pastimes used to be walking alone around a location, just thinking, to myself. I wasn't rambling. I would just take these really long walks at recess or whenever I had free time. When I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, I would sort of wander the campus, or during recess, I would wander the playground alone, just thinking about stuff. Once you think about enough stuff, you sort of land in a position where you don't really need to think about stuff anymore. I sort of, this is something I've only encountered over the past couple of years. I've sort of thought the thought of basically anything of importance that I could imagine. So I've understood myself, I've understood my parents, I just don't bother thinking about stuff anymore because I already thought about it, you know. If I learn something new, or if I take in new information, I'll sort of mull it over for a short period of time, and then it'll be stored away somewhere in my head. So the inside of my head is sort of like a Dewey Decimal System. So when I think, when I put an input, like my database, yeah, there's this internal database that I have. And it's a very neurological database. So if I, for example, if I input, if you give me the word dinosaur, yeah, the word dinosaur imprints itself as a flash, a packet of information inside my head that includes colors, impressions, memories, all sorts of internal experiential objects. So you tell me dinosaur, say something about dinosaurs, and my mind sort of starts in the present and into the past. So I watched a movie, and then access trains. So first you get the internal explosion of data matrices associated with a word or an idea, and I can trace a chain of those ideas as far as it'll go. So you tell me, say something about dinosaurs, and then I'll go whoop, and I'll think, my mind will like go through space-time, travel through space-time, and sort of coalesce onto a documentary I was watching on CuriosityStream. It was a very nice documentary. I haven't finished it yet. I probably will finish it eventually. It was a modern dinosaur documentary, and apparently more dinosaurs had feathers than we thought they did. I'm pretty sure that's a well-known fact at this point. Dinosaurs weren't like the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, all scaly. Dinosaur means terrible lizard, and I think scientists have now proved that dinosaurs are more closely related to chickens than they are alligators. What can you say about it? So there's considerable proof now that dinosaurs had feathers. Most of them, some of them, a good portion of dinosaurs had feathers. Or fur, I don't know. Anyways, so I watched this documentary on CuriosityStream, yeah, and so I'll sort of grab the packet, the little info packet. It's floating in dark space, yeah? The little info packet about CuriosityStream, I'll go, the documentary I watched, to go, and then my mind, if I let it wander a bit, there's this sort of parachute effect. So I input the word, tell me something about dinosaurs. Dinosaur goes into my head. It sort of branches. There's like at least 6 or 7 tendrils that I could go down. Like another tendril, I stand in the middle of my head looking at a picture of a dinosaur. But it's not really a picture of a dinosaur. It's a picture of a dinosaur, but it contains edge case information. So I chase. You say dinosaur. My mind sort of, I can put it there and let it spin, and when it spins, every second or so, a new tangential relationship pops out. So let's do another one. Mug, cup. My mind instantly pops into my favorite mug, a big red mug that has a Louisiana Tech alumni picture on it. And then we go into the secondary information gathering stage, where after the readily available information has been accessed, the tangential, not so readily available information is also accessed. So if I want to follow the cup through my head, I can follow it. I could bring the cup here and show it later, but the red cup, yeah, there are many different directions I can go in. So say something about mugs. I say I have a favorite red mug, and then my association will shoot and say my stepdad's favorite mugs, or pottery, or the color red, or it's a cup that says Louisiana Tech alumni because I graduated from Louisiana Tech, and I will sort of I'll say, well, there's a big plaque that says Louisiana Tech, and I can go off into a sort of a woolly transition. It feels like the wool that's growing off of an object's association inside of my head, and I follow the wool. I follow the wool. So, so when someone is talking about something, I'll give you an example. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with some friends, and we actually never got to playing the actual game since a bunch of people didn't show up. But one of my acquaintances, one of the players, wanted to create a character who wielded a handgun, a small handgun, like Assassin's Creed style. So the gun would be in his wrist, and then it would go pew, pew. And I was telling him, I was saying, in the time period that this game is set in, I didn't have to go with this date. I think I sort of, I'll tell you how it ended. So I told him, I said, that wouldn't be very useful at long distance in this time period. Dungeons and Dragons takes place in the medieval world. I say, before the invention of rifling, guns just weren't that accurate, especially smaller ones. And they weren't very reliable as primary weapons. Guns, before rifling was invented, are more of a area of effect weapon, where guns were sort of, I told him, I explained that before the invention of rifling, before guns were improved upon to where they had significant accuracy, they were used by lines of people shooting at each other across a very wide open field. So guns, before the invention of rifling, were not exactly single-person combat weapons. You didn't have a sniper versus people on the ground. You had very big lines of people facing each other, because otherwise guns, they wouldn't work, because they're very inaccurate. Muskets so I didn't talk about rifling. I just said guns back then weren't very accurate, and he told me, are you a history major? And I'm like, no, it's just stuff that I know, stuff that I talk about. And eventually the point is that from one of my friends wanting to have a character with an Assassin's Creed style minigun in their hands, I went on like a 5-minute tangent of the development of guns, the history of rifling, and warfare techniques. Anyway, so I'll keep talking about the guns, because I don't really like this subject any more than any other subjects. I don't know, I just like talking about subjects. Come on. Humor me. So, if you want to know what a smoothbore weapon, so rifling, rifled barrels have tracks inside of them that cause a bullet to twist as it goes through the muzzle. Yeah? And as the bullet twists, it gains angular momentum. So so if you take a musket, smoothbore, put a ball in it, and shoot it, the ball doesn't go straight because of aerodynamics or something along those lines. I don't know exactly how it works, but what I do know is that if an object is spinning in the air, it'll go straighter. And so what the rifling in a barrel does is it takes the bullet and it spins it sideways so that it goes straighter. And that's how rifling works. That's why a rifle is called a rifle. Because the barrel is rifled. Interestingly enough, each gun has a rifle signature, like a fingerprint. So, specific guns, the rifling inside of them is slightly different. Every gun is different. So if someone fires a bullet and it lodges itself in someone's body or in a wall, and you don't know who shot the bullet, you can find the gun that shot the bullet like the same way you would find a person if they left their fingerprint on a wall. So you can do a ballistic analysis, and you can figure out which gun fired that bullet. So, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know exactly how this works, but I think there's like a registry where guns are, I don't know how that works. I'm not a forensics expert. All I know is that guns have fingerprints, just like we do. So, yeah, that's the kind of stuff I go on. So, what happens is there are these reservoirs of information inside my head. There's these reservoirs. They can be accessed, and once I access them for a short period of time, my brain is like processing information in its random access memory. So, like, if I just loaded, for example, I loaded three separate objects, three separate mental objects during the spiel about bullets, guns, and rifles, plus the observer object. So I'll talk about the observer object after I finish explaining exactly what these objects are. So the object number one was a hybrid object between a past event where I imagine myself back in that position and a related object, which is guns, smoothbore rifles, and armies and tactics. So there was a sort of hybrid object there. And then I decided, well, I kind of want to dig more into the gun and the rifling object. So I jumped, I sort of jumper cabled from guns to rifling. That was another object, a separate object. And while I was talking about rifling, I was sort of draining the reservoir of information about rifling that is readily available inside of that tank. So I go from one tank, I drain it by talking about it, and when I've exhausted all of the readily available information inside of that mental tank, I will sort of spark over to a different tank. And while this is happening, this is actually like a balancing trick. Yeah, while I jump from one tank to another while maintaining a pullback, a sort of like I'm emulating my mind. I don't know if anyone else's mind works like this, but when I watch the inside of my mind, I have a pullback, an emulated pullback that sort of, I don't have to run it if I'm not thinking hard, but sometimes, or whenever I'm discussing something regarding how my mind works, my mind sort of pulls back a layer and pulls back another layer. You can go really high with that. I once went way up with that, like looking at myself, looking at myself, and looking. If you go up the chain, it starts to get really wiggy. You start to feel really weird, like, whoa, who am I? Where am I? Why am I looking at this? Who am I? I think, therefore I am. I have beef with Descartes' simplicity. I have beef with the simplicity of Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Because yeah, I think it was cognito ergo sum. Ergo sum. I can't really explain it without going on a half an hour tangent, but I have beef with cognito ergo sum because thought isn't independent. Thought is not. It's not independent to me. My thoughts aren't my own. If you go far enough up the ladder, you realize that there is a thought above all thoughts. There is a Proto Thought. And that Proto Thought has a very interesting topography. It's more like a landscape of intent. But let's not talk about that esoteric stuff. Let's just talk about bubbles, or I call them jars, bubbles. Jumping off points inside your head. If you want to be more intelligent, I suppose, what you got to do is you have to allow your mind to tangentialize itself. So you pick an object, you pick a subject, pick an object, and you hold it in your mind and you just sort of let it sit there. And instead of closing yourself to the opportunities that this stuff, you sort of follow whatever your mind wants. Wherever your mind goes, you follow it. Follow your mind. Not your heart. Your heart, of course you gotta follow your heart, whatever. But when you're thinking of something, and if you really want to understand it, then what you have to do is you have to synthesize it. Maybe I'll keep talking about this in another video, but this video is already 20 minutes long, and I set a limit for myself. 20 minutes of video. 20 minutes of video. I'll probably expand more on how my thought process works later. But also, one last thing, the tulkerator, the part of the thought that turns into speech, is sort of like a speech engine that happens right here. And I sort of take my high-level thoughts, I sit them on top of the speech engine, and the speech engine's right here, and my thoughts sort of coalesce inside of a pool. You know, like those water dispensers, where the water is here and the spigot is here, and my mouth is like the spigot right here, and my thoughts are like the water, and the water goes through the spigot. And if I want to, I can refill the water by dumping in more of a different liquid. So like, I'm talking about rifling, yeah? Letting the water spill through my mouth, and decide, well, let's just add a little bit of forensic science in there. And the water fills back up, and I go, shh, shh. And what stuff that's coming out now is like grape lemonade. So the lemonade was the rifling, the barrel, whatever. The grape was the forensic psychology, and it gets all mixed up, and out of the spout comes whatever I'm talking about or writing about. You know, because right now I'm a good enough typist that my typing ability is equivalent to my speaking ability. My fingers, there's no barrier between my mind, my fingers, and the computer screen. Just like there's no barrier between my mind, my tongue, and language. I'll probably talk more about this later, but until then, cheers, drink lots of soda, don't go outside, socially distance yourself, don't buy all the toilet paper. If you do have toilet paper, share it, and flatten the curve. See you later.